The caged weapon. Deep under the ruined sky fortress, behind rusted bars and thick walls, Laura sat in silence. The cell was cold. The floor was made of cracked stone. Chains wrapped around her ankles and wrists, tight enough to cut skin. Her skin had scars, old and new. Some from blades, some from burns. All of them told the same story. She was trained to survive pain. She was not born to be free. Laura was made, raised inside a military camp by the Catharn, a brutal alien race. She was not taught kindness or comfort. Only one thing mattered: how long she could endure pain before breaking. And if she broke, they would start again harder. Food was given only after screams. Sleep was earned by lasting through shock treatments. Talking was forbidden. Crying was punished. But Laura had lasted. She had become their most prized creation. A living weapon, silent, strong, obedient. But something deep inside her, a soft light, a voice, still whispered that this was not life. Then came the explosion. The Catharn fortress shook as fire and metal fell from the sky. Human forces had invaded, unexpected, swift, and ruthless. Alarms screamed, soldiers ran. And Laura, still chained in her cage, sat calmly as the walls broke. Minutes passed. The heavy steel door of her prison burst open. She expected another torturer. Instead, a human man stepped in, tall, dressed in dark gray armor, his helmet off. His face was tired. His hands were calloused. His eyes held no hate. He glanced around the room, his gaze landing on her. His brows pulled together slightly, not in anger, in confusion. "What the hell?" he whispered. She stood slowly, the chains clinking. Her claws twitched, her body tensed, ready to strike. But he didn't raise a weapon. He didn't even reach for his belt. "My name's Mason," he said softly. "I'm not here to hurt you." Laura didn't believe him. No one said that without meaning to hurt. She had been told that before, right before they started the experiments again. When Mason stepped closer, Laura lunged, fast, like lightning. Her teeth sank into his arm, just above the wrist. The metal of his suit cracked under her force. She bit down hard, drawing blood. It was instinct, survival. But then, something strange happened. He didn't hit her. He didn't scream. He didn't pull away. He just stood there, still, calm. "I'm not going to fight you," he said again, breathing, slow. Her jaw tightened, her eyes locked with his. She waited for the blow, for the shock collar, for anything. But he just looked at her. And then, he raised his other hand and placed something on the ground between them. A protein bar. "I think you're hungry," he said. She stared at it like it was poison. "Take it," he said softly. "It's not a trick." Still biting his arm, she slowly loosened her grip. Her eyes flicked from his face to the food. Her stomach growled, a deep, painful sound. Cautiously, she knelt and took the bar. The plastic wrapper felt strange in her fingers. She hadn't touched real food in days, maybe weeks. She unwrapped it and sniffed. It smelled sweet. Still waiting for punishment, she took a bite. Nothing happened. Mason sat down on the floor, a few feet away, nursing his bleeding wrist. "You've been through hell," he said. She didn't answer. "Don't worry. I'm not here to chain you again." That was a lie. It had to be. But why wasn't he lying the way her old masters did? Why wasn't he laughing? Why didn't he call her a thing? No one had ever looked at her the way Mason did. She didn't understand it, and that was the first time Laura felt something new. Not fear, not hate, not pain, confusion. She didn't know what to do next. Mason stood up slowly. "I'm taking you out of here," he said. "We're evacuating the prisoners." "Prisoner?" she asked, voice hoarse from silence. "Not anymore," he said. "Not if I can help it." As he unlocked her chains with a small magnetic key, her arms dropped to her sides, heavy and weak. She could have attacked again, bit deeper, slit his throat. But she didn't. Instead, for the first time in her life, she followed someone without being ordered, and she didn't even know why. The sun outside the ruined base was harsh and bright. Laura blinked against the light, her eyes used to darkness. The wind carried dust and smoke from the battlefield. Her feet were bare, cut and bruised, but she walked anyway. Not because someone ordered her. Not because of pain or fear. She followed the human. Mason. There were no chains on her now. That alone made her feel more lost than ever before. He walked ahead of her, slow and calm. He didn't look back often, didn't raise a weapon, didn't speak much. Laura kept watching his back, expecting a trick, a trap, some sudden betrayal. She knew no one gave freedom for free. He stopped once to check a small device on his wrist. A map. He tapped it, then looked toward the mountains. "There's a recovery post 3 miles that way," he said. "We'll rest there." Laura didn't answer. He looked at her. "You okay walking?" Again she stayed silent, but she nodded once. He nodded back. No command, no pressure, just a question. Like she had a choice. That small act made something inside her twist. They started moving again. Around them the desert was quiet. Broken ships and scorched machines littered the sand. A large Catharn tank lay on its side, burned out. Laura's kind had lost this battle. She should have cared, but she didn't. She was too busy trying to understand this human. Mason didn't treat her like a prisoner, or an enemy, or even like an animal. He didn't flinch when she moved too quickly. He didn't tighten his jaw when she walked close behind. She tested him several times, walking faster, slower, even stopping to see if he would yell. He never did. Once she tripped on a rock and fell hard. Instinct made her curl her fists, ready for a beating. But Mason simply turned, offered a hand, and asked, "You okay?" She stared at the hand like it was a blade. When she didn't take it, he didn't force her, just stepped back and let her rise on her own. They reached the recovery post by late afternoon. It was an old mining shelter, half buried in sand, the solar panels cracked but still working. The door opened with a creak and warm air greeted them from inside. Mason walked in first, checked the rooms, and motioned her inside. "There's water in the purifier tank, beds too." Laura entered carefully. She didn't trust walls. She didn't trust comfort. He handed her a metal cup. "It's clean," he said. She drank it slowly. The water tasted sweet, almost too pure. Her hands shook a little. She didn't understand why. Mason sat down on a cot in the corner, pulled off his glove, and looked at the bite wound. It was bruised and red. "You bite like a damn viper," he said with a tired smile. She watched him tense. "Waiting. I'm not mad," he added. "You did what you had to." No one had ever said that to her before. He cleaned the wound without flinching. No complaint, no anger, just quiet strength. It made her stomach twist again. "Why didn't you fight back?" she asked finally. Her voice low and unsure, he looked up, surprised that she spoke. "Because you're not my enemy," he said. "That's not what they told me," she replied. "I'm not them." Silence settled again, but it felt different now. Mason reached into his bag and tossed her another protein bar. "I'll take first watch," he said. "You rest." She didn't lie down. She stood in the corner, arms crossed, eyes open, every muscle tight. Sleep was dangerous. Sleep was when pain started. Hours passed. Mason didn't speak again. He just watched the door, checking the scanner every now and then. Sometimes he hummed. Soft notes. A tune she didn't know. At some point her legs gave in. She sank to the floor, her back against the wall. He didn't move. "Sleep," he said gently. "Nothing's going to happen to you tonight." She wanted to believe that, but it was hard. She laid down finally. Her eyes kept flicking open, expecting a shadow, a shock, a scream. But all she saw was the quiet man, still awake, still watching the door. When she woke up hours later, he was still sitting there. She blinked. Still alive. Still untouched. No chains, no orders, only one human. And a strange feeling she didn't yet understand. Safety. Night had passed quietly. Too quietly. Laura opened her eyes before the first light touched the desert outside. Her senses sharpened immediately. She sat up, her heart already racing, ready for pain, ready for someone to drag her out, test her, cut her. But nothing happened. The old mining shelter remained still. Across the room, Mason sat in the same place. Head tilted, eyes closed. Asleep, but lightly. A weapon lay near his foot, untouched. He hadn't bound her during the night. He hadn't even moved closer. She studied him. Why? No man, no creature, had ever let down their guard around her, not when they knew what she was. Laura rose slowly. The old aches in her limbs flared up, but she moved with silent grace. Years of training made her body strong, quiet, deadly. She crossed the room like a shadow, stopped just 2 feet away from him. His neck was right there. One strike, one sharp movement, and she would be free. But she didn't attack. Not yet. Instead, she crouched and stared at his face. Mason's features were calm in sleep. He didn't look like a soldier. He looked tired, like someone who had seen too much. Laura's hands curled into fists. Why was he being kind? Kindness was a weapon she didn't understand. It made her feel things she didn't know how to fight, things that made her weak. She hated that. So she did what she was trained to do. She struck. Her teeth sank into his shoulder. Hard. This time with more force than before. Her jaws locked tight, pushing through the soft fabric of his shirt until she tasted blood. Mason gasped awake, tense for a moment. His hand moved instinctively, but he didn't hit her. He didn't scream. He didn't shove her off. He just sat there, still. His breath was fast, pain obvious, but his eyes didn't carry anger. Laura released him, stepping back. Her breathing was sharp, chest rising and falling. Why didn't he hit her? She had drawn blood this time, deliberately. That should have made him furious. He should have shouted, punished her, grabbed her, something. He reached for the medkit. Beside him, wincing, opened it, pulled out a patch and pressed it over the wound. You really don't hold back, he muttered, glancing up. His voice wasn't angry, just honest. You don't fight back, she whispered. He looked at her, directly. Should I? I hurt you. Yes. And you still don't stop me? I didn't come to stop you, he said. I came to help. Her voice cracked. Why? Mason paused. The question sat heavy in the room. Because someone helped me once, he said finally. When I didn't deserve it, when I bit hard. She didn't understand. He reached into his pack and pulled something out, a flat silver package. He tossed it toward her feet. She flinched, but it was just food, another protein bar. You're still hungry, he said. Laura stared at the bar. Her mouth ached with the taste of his blood still on her tongue. Her body shook, but not from rage, from confusion. Why do you feed me? He tilted his head. Because no one else has. Right? She bent down slowly and picked up the food. Her hands were trembling. She tore open the wrapper and ate with small, sharp bites, like a wounded animal. Mason didn't stare. He just leaned back against the wall and closed his eyes again. I don't know what they did to you, he said softly. But you're not a monster. I was made to be one. Maybe, he said. But you don't have to stay that way. His words hit something deep. She had never been told she had a choice. Even now, it sounded like a trick. But Mason didn't look like a liar. They spent the rest of the day in silence. He repaired a small drone using spare wires from a broken console. She watched him quietly, sitting cross-legged on the floor. Every Movement he made, gentle, focused, calm. Laura didn't try to hurt him again, not because she couldn't, but because she didn't want to. She didn't understand that feeling. When night came again, she lay on one of the old cots. Mason gave her the better blanket and took the thinner one without a word. She stared at the ceiling for a long time. She had bitten him. Twice. And he had only given her food. That night, as sleep finally crept in, she whispered something no one had ever heard from her lips. Thank you. She wasn't even sure if he heard, but it was the first time she meant it. The desert winds howled through the cracks of the old mining shelter, but inside, everything was still. Laura lay awake, staring at the ceiling. A thin blanket covered her, one Mason had insisted she use. He took the old worn-out one and curled up near the door, resting against his backpack like a pillow. Laura had not slept the night before, not truly. Her body had learned to survive without it, because in the Catharn camp sleep was when the pain came. Rest was a weakness. If you closed your eyes, you woke up screaming. That had been her life. But now there was only silence. No boots. No steel doors slamming open. No voice screaming her name like a curse. Only him. She turned her head to look at Mason again. He wasn't tied to his weapon. His helmet sat beside him, not locked down. His injured arm was wrapped in a fresh bandage, and despite everything, his chest rose and fell in steady rhythm. He wasn't afraid. Not of her. Not after 2 bites. Not even after seeing what she could do. She didn't understand that. She didn't trust it. But something about it made her heart ache in a strange way, like a knot that refused to loosen. For the first time, her eyes closed, and stayed closed. She didn't dream. She didn't expect to wake. But when soft light filtered through the broken window, and warm air brushed her cheek, Laura opened her eyes to something she had never experienced before. Peace. She sat up quickly, her heart beating fast, old habits. But nothing had changed. She was still in the shelter. She was still free. And he was still there. Mason had already woken up. He was sitting outside now, back against the wall, watching the sunrise with a steaming metal cup in his hands. Laura stood and stepped out into the light, slow and silent. He didn't react. He just held up the second cup he'd made and offered it to her. Warm tea, he said. Kind of tastes like boiled sand, but it helps. She hesitated, then took the cup. The warmth surprised her. So did the smell. She sipped slowly. It tasted strange, bitter and dry, but not bad. Mason didn't speak. He just watched the sky turn gold and orange. Laura sat down beside him, not close, not far. Her body was still tense, ready to move, but her hands no longer curled like claws. He glanced sideways. Sleep okay? She nodded once. No nightmares? She looked at him. I didn't dream. Not even darkness. That's rare, he said with a smile. Maybe that's a good sign. She tilted her head. You didn't chain me. Nope. You didn't lock the door. Didn't need to. I could have killed you. He shrugged. You didn't. She stared into her cup. Why aren't you afraid of me? He turned to her, serious now. Because fear makes people treat others like monsters before they even know them. I don't want to do that. But I am a monster, she whispered. No. Mason said gently. You were trained like a weapon, yes, you were used, but a weapon doesn't choose who it points at. You do. That makes you more than a monster. His words stayed in her mind like echoing footsteps she had never chosen before. He pulled a data pad from his pouch and checked the map again. We have 2 days of walking until we reach a safe station, he said. Human territory. You'll be treated differently there. Differently. Some won't trust you. Some may want to question you. But no one will hurt you. She narrowed her eyes. Why would you take me there? Because you deserve a chance, she didn't answer. He stood and stretched. We'll rest another hour, then we move. She watched him go back inside. For the first time, she didn't feel like a prisoner following orders. She wasn't dragged. She wasn't pushed. She wasn't broken. She chose to stand. She chose to follow. Back inside, she sat again on the cot and looked at the floor, at the chain marks now faded from her ankles. They had hurt, but now she didn't feel them anymore. Before they left, Mason handed her something, a scarf. "To keep the sun off your face," he said. "It gets brutal out there." She took it carefully, held it to her skin. It was soft. Her voice trembled. "Why are you being kind?" He smiled at her, not fake, not mocking, just warm. Because someone should be. She didn't know what to say. So she said nothing, but her hand, the one that took the scarf, didn't let go. The desert stretched endlessly before them. Blazing heat shimmered across the sand like waves. Wind whipped fine dust into the air, but Lura and Mason pressed forward. They had been walking for hours. Their shadows stretched long behind them. Lura's feet burned, but she didn't complain. She never did. She had been trained to move until her body broke. But now it felt different. She wasn't walking under threat. She was walking beside him. Mason. Every step was a choice. He kept the pace, slow for her. Even though she knew he could go faster, he carried most of the supplies those she had offered. He refused gently, without ego, just a simple, "You need your strength more than I do." Lura wasn't used to kindness, especially not the quiet kind. It left her confused, restless, inside. At midday, they found shade beneath the remains of a crashed Catharn airship, its metal body half buried in sand. The structure groaned in the wind, but it offered enough cover from the brutal sun. Mason handed her a canteen. "Drink, you need water." She obeyed without thinking, then paused. She looked at him. "Why do you keep doing this?" He raised an eyebrow. "Doing what?" "Helping me." He smiled slightly and leaned back against the metal wall. "Because I want to." "No one's ever wanted to help me," she said. "They only did things to control me, to test how much I could take. I'm not them." She stared at the canteen in her hands. "Then why don't you ask for something?" He blinked. "What?" "Everyone wants something," she said. "Pain, power, loyalty, obedience. You've asked for nothing." Mason's expression softened. "Maybe I just want to see who you really are when no one is forcing you." She frowned, not sure how to respond. "Do you know what you want?" he asked, his voice low and calm. That question struck her like a weapon. She looked away. "No one's ever asked me that before." "Then I'm asking now." Silence fell. The wind outside whispered like old ghosts. Lura sat still, her mind racing. She had been born inside a cage. Her earliest memory was a steel ceiling and cold hands. Her every day had been measured in screams. Her body knew how to fight, how to resist pain, how to shut down emotions, but no one had ever taught her how to want. Desire was dangerous in the Catharn system. Wanting something meant weakness. Hope led to pain. But Mason waited, his eyes gentle and patient. "I don't know," she said at last. "Maybe to not be afraid." He nodded slowly. "That's a good place to start." Lura felt something, strange then. Not pain, not confusion. It was soft, quiet, like a warm breeze moving through her chest, a flicker of something she couldn't name. Hope. Maybe. They rested a little longer, then started walking again. As the sky began to change colors, Mason pointed ahead. "See that ridge? Just beyond it is the border. We'll reach the outpost by sunset." Lura nodded but said nothing. Her mind was still replaying his question over and over. "Do you know what you want?" The idea followed her like a second shadow. When they reached the ridge, Mason slowed. He pulled out a small scanner and checked it. There's movement ahead. Could be patrols. Laura's body stiffened. Catharn? No, he said. Humans. Our side. She should have felt relief. But instead, a new kind of fear filled her. What if they didn't accept her? What if they took her away from Mason? What if they saw her as a threat? A weapon? He seemed to sense her worry. They might ask questions, he said. But I'll be there. She looked at him. They'll see me as the enemy. Then I'll remind them who carried you out of that cell. Her throat tightened. She had no words. They moved forward, and soon the outpost came into view. Gray towers, blinking lights, and the movement of soldiers, humans in armor. A banner waved in the wind, marked with the Earth Coalition symbol. The soldiers saw them and raised their rifles, just in case. Hold your fire, Mason shouted. Friendly, code 92A. They lowered their weapons but watched carefully as the two approached. A tall officer stepped forward. You brought one of them here? She's not a prisoner, Mason said firmly. She's with me. The officer frowned. You can't just bring her into base without clearance. She's not a threat. According to you. She chose to walk here, Mason said. That means something. The officer looked at Laura with suspicion. For the first time, Laura felt something rise inside her, not fear, not shame. Something stronger. She stepped forward. I am not what they made me, she said quietly. I am something else now. The officer blinked, surprised she spoke at all. Mason smiled. In that moment, Laura understood something. She had just made her first choice. Tension filled the outpost air like a drawn bowstring. Laura stood still between rows of armed human soldiers. Their fingers hovered near triggers, eyes locked on her every move. Some looked confused, others looked afraid. A few showed open hate. Their bodies said one thing: don't trust her. She understood that look. It was the same one the Catharn masters used when one of their own became too dangerous. The look they gave before pressing the torture switch. She was used to being hated. What she wasn't used to was someone standing in front of her. But Mason did. He stood between her and the soldiers, his arm out like a shield. His voice was calm but firm. She's not your enemy, I vouch for her. One soldier scoffed. You vouch? She could be a spy. You saw what they did to Sector 9. You want her inside this base? She was in chains. I found her locked, up like an animal, Mason replied. She could have killed me twice. She didn't. She bit you, another man said. And I'm still here, Mason said. Does that tell you more about her or about me? The officer stepped forward again. Protocol says she should be processed, examined, questioned, kept in a holding cell. Laura tensed. A cell. Even the word made her skin burn. Her hands curled into fists. Mason turned slightly, catching her eyes. No one will hurt you, he said softly. She believed him, but she didn't believe the others. Then something happened. Mason turned around, away from the officer, away from the soldiers, and held out his hand to her. Come with me, he said. Laura froze. No one had ever held out a hand to her. Not like this. Not with choice. Not without command. Not without expectation. It wasn't an order. It was an invitation. She could feel her heart thumping in her chest, strange and heavy. Her eyes flicked to the soldiers. Guns still raised, faces tight. They were ready to fire the second she did something wrong. If she took his hand, they might shoot. But if she didn't, she might lose this moment forever. And then she moved. Slowly, carefully, she stepped forward. And she took his hand. Gasps came from the crowd. But no one fired. Laura's hand trembled inside Mason's, her claws barely touching his skin. She expected him to flinch. He didn't. His grip was firm, warm. For a second, she felt like the entire world had gone silent. The officer sighed, rubbing his forehead. You're taking responsibility for her, Mason? I already did the second. I opened that cell door. Then she's your problem. She's not a problem, Mason said. She's a survivor. He led her past the stunned soldiers, hand still in hers. No chains, no collar, no fear. As they walked into the base, Lura's body tensed. Humans stared from every corner. Some whispered, some glared, but some looked curious, like they weren't sure what to feel. She could sense it all. Inside, they were taken to a medical tent. A kind woman named Dr. Yara scanned Mason's injuries and patched up his arm again. You've got deep tissue damage, she said. You really let her bite you? She had her reasons, he replied with a shrug. Dr. Yara turned to Lura, scanning her from head to toe. You need rest, food. Your vitals are a mess. I'm fine, Lura said quietly. You're not, the doctor replied gently. But that's okay. You're not alone now. Lura looked away. That word again, alone. She wasn't. Not anymore. Later, they were given a temporary room inside the base. A clean space with 2 beds, soft lighting, and a door that didn't lock, from the outside. Lura stood in the center looking at everything. Her fingers brushed across the sheets. The smell was strange. Clean, warm, safe. Mason sat on the edge of the second bed, unlacing his boots. You can sleep now. No alarms, no torture, just sleep. She nodded slowly but didn't move. He looked up at her. You okay? I've never had a bed before, she whispered. Not a real one. He patted the mattress. Try it. It won't bite. She smiled slightly. That's supposed to be my line. He chuckled softly, then turned off the overhead, lights leaving only a soft lamp glowing. As Lura finally lay down, pulling the blanket up to her chin, she stared at the ceiling. Her body expected chains, her mind expected screaming. But none came. Just Mason's quiet breathing nearby. Just silence. And safety. Before her eyes closed, she said something she didn't think she ever would. If you hadn't held out your hand, I might have taken your life. Mason's voice came from the dark, calm and true, and I would have still said you were worth saving. Days passed. Lura stayed inside the base with Mason. The first night she hardly slept. The second night she rested longer. By the third, she didn't wake up gasping. Each day something inside her changed, not because she was told to, but because she was allowed to. No one shouted at her. No one touched her without asking. No one chained her to the floor. At first, the soldiers gave her long stares whenever she passed. Some moved away. Others murmured as she walked by. But she kept her head high because she had Mason beside her, and Mason
never left her side. He trained in the mornings, helped rebuild damaged equipment in the afternoon, and shared meals with her in the quiet mess hall at night. He didn't treat her like a project, or a threat, or a burden. He treated her like someone. One
evening, they sat under a broken antenna tower, watching the pink and purple sunset wash over the desert. Lura sat cross-legged, staring at the sky with wide eyes. She'd never seen a sky like this before, not through metal grates or torture room ceilings. The colors felt unreal. Beautiful. Why does it look like that? She asked. Mason smiled. Something about the way light hits dust. The war made the air dirty, but it gave us better sunsets. That's strange, she said. Pain leaves beauty behind. He nodded slowly. Sometimes. They sat in silence a while longer. Then Lura asked something she had never dared ask anyone before. What will happen to me after this? Mason didn't answer at first. He leaned back on his elbows, gazing at the darkening sky. You can go wherever you want, he said. No one's forcing you to stay. Her eyes narrowed. But what am I? I'm not a soldier, I'm not normal. He looked at her seriously now. You're free. That's not a role. It's a beginning. She looked away. I wouldn't know what to do. Mason leaned forward. Then stay with me. For as long as you want. Until you figure it out. Her heart skipped a beat. He wasn't offering a cage. He wasn't offering protection. He was offering space, time, choice, and that was more than anyone had ever given her. The next morning, Base Command summoned Mason. They had reviewed his report. They now saw Laura as a valuable witness, someone who had seen the inside of Catharn War labs, who could help them save others still trapped. But she would have to choose to testify. No one could make her. The officer asked, "Will she help?" Mason replied, "Only if she wants to." When he told her later, Laura didn't answer right away. That night, she walked the edge of the compound alone, watching the lights flicker across the sand. She thought of the others still in cages, thought of herself alone in a dark room waiting for pain to stop. Then she thought of Mason, of his hand reaching toward her, of his voice in the quiet. The next day she walked into the command office and spoke 5 clear words. "I'll help. On my terms." It shocked everyone, but they agreed. Laura started speaking in private sessions. Her memories were sharp, her words quiet, but clear. She remembered rooms, faces, places where others might still be alive. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a rescuer. Word of her courage spread. Soldiers who once feared her now gave small nods of respect. Even the doctor smiled warmly each time she passed, but not everyone accepted her. One night, a young officer shouted at her in the corridor, called her a monster, blamed her for the deaths of friends in a battle she had never seen. Laura didn't fight back. She just said, "I was once used, like a weapon. I'm not that anymore." The officer didn't reply, but Mason was watching from the end of the hallway. Later that night, back in their room, he handed her a small box. "What's this?" she asked. He scratched the back of his neck. "Something I found in storage. Thought it might suit you." She opened it. Inside was a soft necklace, simple, with a tiny silver ring. "Is this a gift?" she asked, stunned. "Yeah," he said. "Something to remind you you're not property. You're not a tool. You're someone." She stared at it, heart pounding. Then slowly, she placed it around her neck. "Thank you," she whispered. "Always." The war didn't end that month, or the next. But Laura stayed. She chose to help. She chose to heal. And she chose to stay by Mason's side. Sometimes people asked her why. Why trust a human? Why love someone who once might have been her enemy? She would smile quietly and say, "He didn't pull away when I bit him. He didn't flinch when I was broken. He saw a person when I didn't know I was one. And that was enough."